You know, I've never noticed how much character development Machida has gotten since she was first introduced. Anyway, welcome to my review, thoughts, impressions, breakdown of chapter 153 of Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro, the second to last chapter of the manga. You know, I thought I would be like Batman right here, but instead I'm more like Thanos. One to go. Like I mentioned in my previous video, I'm content. I'm completely okay with the fact that the manga is ending. Like if the previous chapter was the last chapter, I would have been happy. I would have been satisfied. And that's because last chapter was definitely one of the best chapters of the manga. Like I'm talking top 10, top 5. If you guys want me to do a top 10 manga chapters of Don't Toy Me Miss Nagatoro, let me know in the comments below. I might do it once the manga is over. So it truly is the beginning of the end. We are in the end game now. I say that because last chapter we wrapped up a mini arc. For those that don't know or need a quick recap, let me tell you what happened. Nagatoro was upset with Senpai for lying to her. He eventually gets a chance to apologize, and now their relationship is stronger than ever. They end up going to a festival where we get to see all the side characters from the manga, which was really nice. Like I mentioned last video, seeing all these side characters really kind of gave me the feeling of finality, like yeah, this manga is coming to an end. Then later on in the chapter, Nagatoro and Senpai go to watch the fireworks together. Nagatoro expresses her true feelings and tells Senpai that she loves him. And then we get a beautiful kiss underneath the fireworks. Again, it definitely felt like a finale, so I was definitely curious to see what Nanashi had planned for these last two chapters. Well, we now have chapter 153, the second to last chapter, so let's get into it. First off, I absolutely love the opening panel. Nagatoro chilling on the couch, Senpai painting, Hana looking at the fish they picked up. It's just so cozy, so familiar. So the manga ends up doing the generic, the cliche, the trope, whatever you want to call it. The manga ends up doing the thing that most manga that are wrapping up do, which is a time skip / montage through Senpai's senior year. And when I say cliche isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just means that it's cliche. Whenever I see a manga that I like do this cliche or trope, I'm always like, man, that's content we could have gotten in the main series. We end up seeing Senpai take an entrance exam to try to get into Tokyo University, and he passes along with Machida. Again, she's had some great character development since she was first introduced. So he's going to be classmates with the president and Machida. This makes him feel a bit uneasy, like is he good enough to stand with these two? And yeah, I can barely show anything from this panel. Later on, we get Nagatoro congratulating Senpai in person, and we get this beautiful panel here. They get to talking, and we learn that the manga is going to be doing the cliche thing where the characters are going to have to separate from each other so that way they can pursue their goals. Nagatoro still has to finish high school, and Senpai is going to Tokyo University, which is 3 hours away. But at least it makes sense. Most of the time when a romance manga does this cliche, it's just kind of dumb. Like the female character has to go find themselves or some dumb reason like that. Series like Toradora and Nisekoi come to mind. But again, in Nagatoro's case, it makes sense. Plus, he's only 3 hours away, so he can make a weekend trip back home every once in a while. While they're talking, Nagatoro ends up asking, "Hey Senpai, what's your dream?" That question has actually been on my mind for a while, more for Nagatoro than Senpai. Like, what's Nagatoro's dream? What does she want to do after high school? We know she likes judo, but is she just doing it for fun, or does she actually want to try to make a career out of it? We don't know, and that's kind of disappointing. That feels like something that could have been explored, but too little too late. But at least we get to explore Senpai's dream. So when Senpai is asked this question, he doesn't even really know. Does he want to be an illustrator, a designer, a manga artist? In the very first chapter, he was working on a comic book. And speaking of the first chapter, it's kind of crazy to think about if Senpai never dropped his comic book, if he never went to the library to study, he probably would have never interacted with Nagatoro. Like, they didn't have any prior interactions before that. It's not like Nagatoro had a crush on him and was waiting for an excuse to talk to him, and him dropping the manga was said excuse. No, Nagatoro was just being Nagatoro. We cut to Senpai having lunch with Nagatoro and her friends in the cafeteria for the very last time. I think the last time we saw them all eating together in the cafeteria was all the way back in chapter 11. Senpai was truly terrified of them back then. He saw them as demons. And Nagatoro was ready to rip their heads off for messing with Senpai. She stood up for him when things went too far. And they do end up apologizing by the end of that chapter to show that they're not terrible people. Also, would you look at that art style change? It's always fun to go back to the earlier chapters and see just how much the art style has changed. And yes, Yoshi's hair has reached maximum power. Her hair wasn't even sticking up back then, it was completely flat. This is when we learned that Nagatoro volunteered to give a speech at Senpai's graduation. I was like, wait, hold up, Nagatoro is a model student? Yeah, the student council asked Nagatoro and 3 others, hey, can one of you do a speech at the seniors' graduation? And Nagatoro volunteered. So I guess she is a model student. This makes me wish we got more of a peek into Nagatoro's actual school life. Like, how serious is she about school? How high are her grades? How do her classmates view her? They must hold her in high regard if the student council is asking her to do a speech. Again, you wouldn't think that Nagatoro would be considered a model student, especially with what happens in chapter 1, like, yo, this is how you treat your fellow students? This also gets me curious about Senpai. How do his classmates view him? Do they view him like a loner like Nagatoro did at the beginning of the manga, or do they see him as just a average guy? Is he known for his painting skills? These are things that would have been nice to explore, but oh well. Seeing that Nagatoro volunteered to do a speech, he ends up volunteering to do a speech for the senior class, which is a little weird. Normally, isn't it the class president that does the speech, but you know, whatever. Also, this is another example that Senpai has grown as a character. Senpai in chapter 1 would have never done this. That's where the chapter basically ends. This chapter wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. But at least it brought up something that I'm interested in. What is Senpai's dream? What does he want to do with his life? Next chapter is also looking to be a bit cliche, with it ending with, Senpai graduating. Again, cliche doesn't mean bad. But also something I have to mention is that normally when Nanashi, the author of Nagatoro, does a cliche, normally they'll do like their own twist on it. The twist here being that Nagatoro and Senpai are going to be giving graduation speeches. I can't really think of any other manga that has done that before. I don't imagine the speech taking up the whole chapter, so hopefully we still get a little time skip of them together in the future. Nanashi over on Twitter has announced that the last chapter is finished, but needs some, final touches to it. People are still wondering if Nanashi is going to do something with the ticket. I explained in my last video that I think it's way too late for the ticket to have any narrative impact on the story. Someone said that Nagatoro should use the ticket to be like, hey, make sure you come visit me. And honestly, that would be a really sweet way of reintroducing the ticket back into the story. Someone said she should use the ticket to move in with him. I can see that being a sweet scenario, like maybe he wants to ask her to move in with him, but he's too nervous to. And then she pulls out the ticket like, hey, I want to move in with you. What do you think? Someone said she should use it to get married, and I don't really like that particular approach that much. This one made me laugh. Someone was like, yo, if she doesn't use it, that means there'll be a sequel series. Speaking of sequel series, my April Fool's Nagatoro sequel series video made its way over to Reddit, and it started to gain some attention. I feel so bad for anyone that legitimately thinks that Nagatoro is getting a sequel because of that video. I dropped that video before it was announced that Nagatoro was actually ending, but I do drop a lot of hints in that video that it's fake, that it's just an April Fool's joke. As of the recording of this video, the last chapter is going to be dropping in 3 weeks on July 22nd. How do you feel about the manga ending? How did you feel about this current chapter, chapter 153? Please leave your comments down below. And if you like the video, like the video. And if you like me, subscribe to me. And as always, this has been Broken, and I'll catch y'all next time.